Hello and welcome to the Ikikcupi Bassett Creek Oral History Podcast, where our guests discuss ways that they and other Indigenous peoples have lived, worked, and played in the Ikikcupi watershed for thousands of years. This project was created in Minnesota Makoce, or Minnesota, the traditional and contemporary homelands of the Dakota people. The project was co-led by Dr. Casey Keeler and Crystal Boyd, with support from community partners. More information is included at the end of this episode. On behalf of everyone who contributed to this project, thank you for tuning in.
All right, good afternoon. Today I'm here with Roxanne Gould to participate in the Ikikcupi Bassett Creek Oral History Project. Good afternoon, Roxanne.
Good afternoon.
So we're going to go ahead and jump in and ask Roxanne some questions about the geography of the Bassett Creek watershed. So when you think of Bassett Creek and the area surrounding it, do you think of this region in particular ways as a Native person?
Absolutely. I'd like to start off with just introducing myself in my language. And then I'll answer the question. Buju Nindenoi Magana Duk, Bidabi no Quaint Indigenous cause, Gitchi Quaindung, Anishinaabe and Dao, Minawa, Odawa, Minawa, Ojibwe, Bishabitown and Junjiba, Makwan and Dudame. So, what I said was, greetings, my relatives. My name is First Light of the Day Woman. That's my spirit name. I am Grand Traverse Band, Odawa and Ojibwe, from a village called Bishabitown in Michigan, and I am Bear Clan. But today I live in the homeland of the Dakota people here in Golden Valley, Minnesota. So, and I moved here 16 years ago. I've been in the Twin Cities for about 26 years. And every place I go, I think about it in terms of the First Peoples. And I try to honor that, whoever the First Peoples are, and try to develop a relationship with those peoples to find out what kinds of things that they value, that they support, what their history is, what kinds of things they need from people who are living in their homelands. Because I would want that from others who are come to live in my homeland. And so when I moved originally to Minnesota, I knew that this was all Dakota homeland at one time. It from, southern Minnesota clear up to the northern boundary waters. I knew that was all Minnesota Makoce. I was born in South Dakota, born and raised around Oceti people. My grandma's second husband is Hihantuan and Sichanhu Lakota, and he helped to raise me. So I know a little bit about the history, of the Oceti people. And before I came here, I worked in Sioux City, Iowa, and I worked with a lot of Santee people, Santee Dakota people, who were greatly impacted by the history, particularly the exile that happened here. And so I was aware of that when I came here. When I moved and one of the reasons I came to the Twin Cities is because there's a very vibrant Native community in this area. And I came here I was a single mom with 2 kids and came here to do my doctorate degree at the university. So did plan on staying, but I fell in love, and what more can I say? This is home. And now it's the place I've lived longer than any other place. Mm-hmm. So, and it is close, it is close to my Anishinaabe homeland. So that's nice because I do get to interact on a regular basis with Anishinaabe people, as well as lots of other Indigenous peoples. When I came to Golden Valley, I've learned over the years about this place. I knew that it was a place that the Dakota people had not lived, but I know as all of their homeland, it was a place that was valued, and maybe even more so because they left it untouched. It was valued. It was a pristine wetland that probably provided them with lots of food and medicine as they walked that trail from Lake Minnetonka, Medicine Lake, down the Bassett Creek to the Mississippi River. Because we know that the most biodiversity is near the water. So I suspect it was a place where they maybe not only fished but they probably gathered. They probably did a lot of gathering of medicines and foods. But so these were things that I thought about when I came here, but I haven't been able to find much information about what this place was like pre-colonization. There's nobody that seemed to care about writing that down. And so it's something that still needs to be researched. And I think it would be a really interesting research project for somebody. And also to talk about the impacts of settler colonialism on this, particularly this ecosystem here that the Dakota people valued so much that they left it untouched.
I appreciate those thoughts on thinking about what does it mean to be a Native person living in somebody else's homelands, mm-hmm. and the responsibility as a Native person and a Native woman, mm-hmm. to learn about those communities and those histories as well. And thinking about this Bassett Creek area, has living here informed your identity, if at all?
I think any place you live helps to form your identity. I think just as I age, I'm a grandmother. Besides being a mother, I'm a grandmother. I have 2 grandchildren. And mostly I think about what kind of a world are they going to inherit? Mm-hmm. And I do my best to create a voice, or to put a voice out there for those that cannot speak for themselves, for the land, for the water, for the natural beings that rely upon the ecosystems of this place, and for the people who, this is part of their original homeland. So it all shapes my identity, and maybe because Dakota people never lived here, I've really worked hard to understand more about the ecosystem of this place. Maybe more so than any other place I've ever lived. And some of that has to do with age too. It's just being more slowing down, mm-hmm. being more observant, even this little house and this little piece of land, all of the beings that rely upon this little piece of land, and developing a relationship with them, being a good relative to them, trying not to do anything that's going to harm them. And that's been a learning process for me. And I've had to sometimes apologize for mistakes I make along the way. Unfortunately, colonization taught us that the ways of our ancestors were bad. Mm-hmm. And a lot of times, though, that knowledge, that traditional ecological knowledge and traditional knowledge period just didn't get passed on. Mm-hmm. And so you have to seek out people who still know. And a lot of times they're not in your own family. But that's what I've done. I've worked hard to seek out people that still know. And I've worked hard just to do my own research and to spiritually connect with the beings in this place.
So kind of on the flip of that question, and thinking about your identity and place and where you live, do you think at all about identity as a Native person who lives in a suburb and kind of what that means in terms of expectations or identity or belonging?
I don't think so much about suburb or city or whatever. I think about my relationship to the land on which I live. I think about what it was like before the destruction that was brought with settler colonialism, that continues to be brought with settler colonialism. So I think about it more in terms of just the land that I live on, it's taken time, and it always takes time to develop relationships with the humans in wherever I live, because I live differently than a lot of them do. And I think what they've come to realize is that we're not a threat to them. We're not trying to cause them any kinds of harm. We just choose to live differently. And at some point, I hope we even maybe influence some of them to live differently as well. But so I don't really think about myself as a suburban person, because if I want to, I can access the urban area. I can access more rural areas, and we work on a Dakota land recovery project out at Upper Sioux. We teach, up in the beautiful Lake Superior watershed areas. So, I just more or less think about my responsibility to that piece of land. To that, and I don't mean about piece of land, to that living place, because this is a living entity here.
So, you've touched a little bit on this, but are you involved in any cultural activities in this area, or perhaps even in Minneapolis? Or is this something you feel you need to return to your tribal community or reservation in order to connect in a cultural way?
No, I've always been involved in cultural activities and spiritual activities. Not so much here in Gold Valley, because there hasn't been any other than what we do here. When we do ceremonies and stuff in our own home or on our own piece of land, or we have people gather here. But in the urban area, I was very involved. My husband and I started a Dakota and Ojibwa language immersion school in Minneapolis, and have been involved with doing work with many different Native organizations. Our kids work in the community and so forth. So we have always been involved with the community in many ways. My grandson is a champion powwow dancer, so that's part of our life as well. And my husband and I work, like I said, with a project called Makoce Ikikcupi, which is a Dakota land recovery project, where we're purchasing back Dakota homelands with settler donations and working then to restore that land and to create sustainable villages using traditional Dakota architecture, building earth lodges so that exiled Dakota people can come back home. And we've worked with several non-Native organizations providing Native voice. I chaired the Indigenous Roundtable for the Science Museum for a number of years. Now Darlene and Jim are doing it. Because they have the second largest Native collection there. So they have a responsibility to our communities. And, and of course, we work up north at University of Minnesota-Duluth and work with communities there as well. So it's really a part of everything that we do.
Yeah. I'm interested in hearing a little bit more about the Dakota Land Recovery Project. Mm-hmm. Where is that based?
It's in Upper Sioux. I mean, it's right by Upper Sioux. We just purchased our first piece of land. It's a village now we call Zani Otuwe. Healing, place of healing. And we just finished our first Earth Lodge there. Although we started it 3 years ago, we got a stop work order from the city of Granite Falls because it didn't adhere to modern building codes. But the Earth Lodges were one form of Dakota architecture. They last, 50 to 100 years. I mean, they're very, very solid structures. But it's off grid. Anything off grid is considered illegal. And because it doesn't have electricity and indoor plumbing, we use compost toilets. And we do have a central water feature. But, we gather the water from there and then bring it inside the lodge. But we just had ceremony. We just had our Happy New Year ceremony. Dakota New Year is spring equinox. So we just had that out there. But we've been planting. Last year we planted 400 trees and bushes, creating a food forest. We got 500 more that we're going to be planting out there. We have some small gardens. Eventually we'll have up to 7 earth lodges there. We're looking at some other pieces of land also, and there are some settlers that are interested in donating some land.
That's amazing. To
us. And I think a lot of Native people realize land is everything. That's what's most needed. If there's any kind of reparations, which there should be, this should be in the form of land, and it should be, in my opinion, too, in control of our waters and our watersheds. Mm-hmm. We should have a voice in that because, what is it? Indigenous people make up 6% of the world's population, control 25% of the world's land, but that land contains 85% of the world's biodiversity. So we're really the only ones. We're the only ones that I think are a hope for a healthy planet. So it's to the advantage of settlers to return those to return those lands and control of those waters to us, because we will make sure that they're healthy. Mm-hmm. It was interesting too, because my village, or in my homeland, we had a river that had been dammed and just became toxic, and they used to move logs down and so forth. But they came to my tribe to ask to help to restore the health of the river. Mm-hmm. And I think that's what needs to happen here too. It needs to happen with this watershed. This watershed is not healthy. It's not a dump anymore. Bassett Creek is not a dump. At one time, people used to dump all kinds of crap in it. And they even were going to make it a sewer. They might have even made it a sewer at one time. Yes, this beautiful watershed. This is beyond my understanding. We don't have that today, but we still have invisible things that are going into that water. It runs through 2 golf courses, which just put tons of chemicals, to maintain these pristine greens and so forth. So there's all kinds of invisible toxins that are still going into the water, and they'll even spray like for what they call weeds along the creek. I had to get after them about that. I keep telling them I would rather work with you than yell at you after you do something wrong, but they haven't chosen to work with me on things. I'm happy. I've tried to seek out to serve on the Bassett Creek Watershed Commission. When they said, well, that position is full. I've talked to city council people. I've said, I'm happy to help. I'm a professor. I know a few things, but no one's asked me.
I'm glad you kind of brought this back to Bassett Creek and the watershed, because something I was thinking of when you were first speaking about the Dakota Land Recovery Project is if you think that something like that could work here in the Twin Cities and in this region.
Oh, absolutely.
What that might look like.
What a great question. Oh my gosh, I love that question.
And thank you for your willingness to go with me off the question list.
No, yeah, I love it. I really like having a conversation. That's our hope. Because, every place in Minnesota is, and this is throughout Turtle Island,
right,
is somebody's indigenous homeland.
Yep.
No matter where you work, recreate, worship, live, it is somebody's indigenous homeland. And absolutely it could work here. It could. We could set up sustainable communities here as well. I think there's a fear on the part of developers that maybe settlers might like this too, Because if you've ever been inside an earth lodge, it's beautiful. It looks like a pile of dirt from the outside, but it's so well insulated. Even in the dead of winter, it stays about 58 degrees without the wood stove burning. And inside, this is beautiful tamarack walls and so forth. But no, absolutely it could work, and it would create a much, much smaller carbon footprint. And like this summer when the gardens were coming, it looks kind of muddy out there right now, but when the gardens were coming up and stuff, it's beautiful. It's beautiful. And it's a place that nothing, everything is shared in common. We share everything in common out there. We all work. Each person works to the best of what they can offer. People have different talents and different abilities. We eat well. We laugh a lot. We work hard. And it's good. And we have little kids running all over, and they get to breathe fresh air, and they're tired at the end of the day. It was so beautiful that when we did the ceremony, the solstice ceremony this past week, after we ate and after we'd had sweat and, we did all of our work and stuff, there was a couple little kids that crawled up on the bed and were sleeping underneath the buffalo robe. Yeah, they were just sweet, I was like, this is what it's all about, this is, and it's there's other places throughout the country that are doing, we're going to be visiting a place in Alabama, Makoce Creek. They have 240 acres that is doing something similar. So I think it's very possible. The good thing that came out of the legislative process, as awful as it was, and it didn't pass until the last second on the last night. It was in legislation for 2 years before they let us finish building. Or they were going to throw us in jail, fined us $10,000 for building earth lodges. That was their solution. But we got both Republican and Democrat support, which was very interesting to me. The Republicans were more like, yeah, they can't tell us what to do. And the Democrats were like, yes, it's your right to practice your culture. So yes, I think that there's possibilities if we can educate people about the benefits of living closer to Earth. And my hope is that Indigenous peoples across Turtle Island will begin to all do this. Not every Indigenous person is going to choose to live this way, but I think there's a lot of us that would, and yeah, it's, capitalism is set up in a way that, so you'll buy more stuff. Everybody's got to have their own house. Everybody's got to have their own cars, got to have their own computers, got to have their own washers, dryers, got to have everything. Where if you share those things in common, you don't buy as much stuff. You don't have to buy as much stuff. It's a completely different lifestyle. So, yeah, I think it could work. I think it's... as we would get closer into the city, I think some people would really freak out, but I think certainly on the edges of the cities, on the edges of the metro, it could be wonderful.
And so much of what you just said was about the physical structure and the community and the systems, but what about accessing land, purchasing land for such structures and activities and cultural... right now we're doing that through what we call settler donations, because Indigenous people should not have to buy back their own homelands, and that has happened. I mean, it's happened here in Minnesota, but it's I think a constant process of educating settlers about. This is the history. This is what happened. This was our relationship to this land. This is how we care for it. This is how we're guardians of it. And there are a growing number of settlers who are saying this most recent conversation we're having with this farm couple is their kids don't want the land. They don't, and. So they're asking us, do you want it? This is the homeland. Do you want this back? And so I think it's definitely possible, and it's our hope. To me, it's the greatest hope we have for our children to leave them a healthy planet. Absolutely. It almost brings tears to my eyes.
Yeah. It does me too. Because I want, and I think education has to really change. Right. The education system that I grew up in, especially, I don't know how your education was. was really focused on kind of capitalist, technological, sit in your seat kind of doing things. And I think children have to be much more outside. They have to learn they're going to have to learn skills, critical head knowledge. I think if they learn traditional knowledge, that is critical.
Right.
It's very critical. That will come. But I think that's something that's going to have to change. And we know that. We know our education systems. And I'm in education. That's my field. But we know it has to change.
Right.
For this planet to survive, where kids have to have a greater relationship to the natural world. And they have to learn how to do things. They're going to have to learn how to grow things and gather things and be in relation. Right. That their food just doesn't come from a box in the grocery store. And, they'll have to learn things.
I think that would just be so significant if we think about the geography of the watershed, as you mentioned, going from Lake Minnetonka to Medicine Lake to the Mississippi River. If there was a way for Dakota people to access their homelands in this watershed and be able to do something like an Earth Lodge to provide cultural teachings, that's also just not for Dakota people.
Right.
That's for all people and all youth, and how significant that could be for future change, positive change.
Yeah.
And I also think about the role of universities. You're at Minnesota-Duluth, I'm at University of Wisconsin, and some of the most innovative and cutting-edge classes are those classes that get college students outside in the environment.
Yes.
So it's like we can see it at the collegiate level, and students are so drawn to that, and the instructors get such accolades, but why is there that gap? It's truly remarkable.
Yeah, and it's so we do have to change it. I remember my granddaughter, one of the things you asked about, what some of the things that we've been involved in here in the metro area. I became involved in language immersion. First of all, my doctoral dissertation was working with the Maoris in Aotearoa and looking at their educational movement and their language revitalization movement. And when I returned, my granddaughter was born. We put her in an Ojibwe language immersion school. And it was so amazing. What an incredible place to start her educational life. And I don't think it's ever quite lived up to that experience since then. Hope Flanagan, who's actually Seneca, but she's lived in the cities for long. She's like me. She believes you should understand the original people here and, follow their protocols and stuff. So she learned Ojibwe. She's a fluent speaker of Ojibwe. And so she taught along with Lillian Rice, who was Potawatomi, but spoke fluent Ojibwe, fluent Odawa. She spoke like 5 languages. And she was the elder, and she's now passed. But anyways, so they were my granddaughter's first teachers from the age of 1.5 until she was 5. She kind of went to a high five program in between there, but then she'd go to after school stuff there. But Hope would have them outside all the time because she's also self-trained ethnobotanist. One of the best, I think, in Minnesota. And much of her food, she works out at Dream of Wild Health, but much of her food is wild food that she gathers, and her medicines are wild and so forth. So she had the kids outside, and not just, it was every season, So when she had to go to regular school, she really didn't like it at all because she had to sit in a seat all day and blah, 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 blah. So it was really tough. It was really tough for her. So, yes, education has to change. Kids have to learn. We all do. We all have to learn by doing, and we all have to connect because Our spirit demands it. We're part of this ecosystem. We're not stewards over. We're part of it. And we have to, and when we're separate from it, it hurts our spirit.
Right. So transitioning a little bit, Hahawakpdan is the Dakota name for Bassett Creek. What do you think about the role and importance of language and place names, particularly in these predominantly white settler spaces that we're surrounded by?
I think it's vitally important because it tells us, it tells us some of the history of this place, about who was here first, about the relationship of those first peoples to this place. It tells us a lot about the ecosystem of the place, because a lot of times it'll talk about some of the natural beings. Those names will include the names of natural beings and stuff, maybe that were once in this place and no longer are. So I think place names are vitally important. Language is vitally important, and I love a good linguist. They can tell you this part of this word is 5,000 years old, and we know this because. And one of my Ojibwe language teachers is like that. He's a linguist, and I love that he can pull so many beautiful teachings from such a small part of the language. Mm-hmm. So, and I'm not a fluent speaker. I've been learning it as a second language, and I will always be a learner. My grandfather was the last first language speaker in my family, and he was a product of boarding schools, and felt like he shouldn't teach it because it was a very abusive experience when he would speak the language. He was beaten and ridiculed. So we didn't learn it from him. But I think the language is vitally important. And Dakota is especially in danger. There's maybe more first language speakers in Canada, but there's only a couple left here in Minnesota. And there's some people who, like Tante Masa and Shishokadutta, who are language teachers that speak very well, but it's still a second language for them.
This really has me thinking also about the significance of having access to the land in order for young people to learn the language as well.
And it's amazing because even, as we work out in Zanio it's like your DNA begins to remember stuff that your ancestors knew just by being there and engaging with the land and the spirits of that place. Our first place is only 21 acres, but we're already, getting so much affirmation from the land and from the spirits that what we're doing is a good thing. And that's beautiful. That's life affirming. That's hopeful. And also we see some of the different animals coming and returning, just as I see here. If you provide something for them that's life affirming, they'll come. And you let them know that this is safe. It's a safe place, and we want you here. That will come. So yeah. Did I answer that question?
Yeah.
Okay.
Something that I'm just thinking of hearing you speak. We've talked about language and land, but having access to both of them is really important, and I think something that we easily forget or lose sight of. We can teach folks the language in a classroom, but if they don't have access to the land, their homelands, that we're kind of also doing a disservice.
Yeah. Well, and I think the land itself is healing. You have to be in relationship with it and all of the beings of the land, and how else do you know who your relatives are? It's like not knowing who your human relatives are. You long for that, right? If you don't know, and I think our souls long for that relationship with the other beings that we no longer pay attention to, so often. So I think it's healing. I think it also really stimulates you intellectually. It's not just spiritually or physically, but I think intellectually, because you begin to ask questions. We never have enough time out there with our elders, with our language people, because we have so many things to talk about. We never, we don't ever run out of things to talk about, because it stimulates, like, oh my gosh, what about this? But what about this? And and some things, it's not that the elders always know, or even the language people always know, but you begin to put it out to the universe, and we figure it out. We figure it out. So, yeah.
I think this all underscores the significance of Native people, Dakota people, having access to their land in this watershed. Right? So it's not so far away.
It's not at all.
We have so much to learn from the watershed and this environment, and it provides so much for us that unfortunately we've lost sight of due to development and capitalism
and it's
environmental harm.
We have to realize water is the most sacred being on earth. It's what makes earth earth. Only, 70% of Earth's surface is water, but only 1% of that water is potable drinking water.
Wow.
Not just for the 7 billion humans that live on Earth, but for all the plants and all the animals. 1%. And when you think about that, why would you should treat every single drop as so precious that you would not do anything to harm it.
Right.
And I think, capitalism doesn't want you to know that. This house was a watershed. This land, it's filled in with clay. Mm-hmm. It was destroyed with clay. When I want to plant something on this land, I have to bring in soil. I have to bring in topsoil because they filled it with clay. This amazing, beautiful watershed. Right. So I think if people understand this, my hope is that they'd say, oh my God, I didn't know that. Now that I know, I will do differently, I'm not going to plant grass that makes me use all kinds of water that animals, plants, and humans should drink. Mm-hmm. I'm not going to flush my toilet when I pee every time because that's clean, potable water. What is it? If it's yellow, let it mellow. If it's brown, flush it down. And hopefully in time they'll start using gray water instead of our drinking water.
Yeah, that's always been a pet peeve too.
Yes.
Flushing basically clean
water. Drinking water down the toilet. Yeah. So these are things that when they ask people like Jim and I to come and talk, they want to hear about the cultural, the pretty, the foods, festival, feathers.
Stereotypes.
foods, festival, clothes, and feathers kind of thing. They don't want to hear about this kind of stuff. But this is really the deeper stuff, that we've had a relationship with for thousands of years. It's why we were able to live in our homelands for thousands of years without causing harm.
But we all have a responsibility, not just the native people.
Absolutely. Oh my gosh, even more so, because we're such a small, what are we, 1% of the population, 2% of the population here in Minnesota. So we are a very small part of the population. Everybody has responsibility. And if people can all start thinking, how can I do better, we will do better.
Right. So part of doing better is a way to think about this oral history project. So this oral history project grew out of the Valley Community Presbyterian Church land acknowledgement process. So what do you think about land acknowledgement statements broadly? And after that work has been done to create a responsible land acknowledgement statement, what do you see is necessary follow-up and supplemental work?
Well, what's important is the supplemental work. What's important is the follow-up. The land acknowledgement statement is like telling somebody, I'm sorry. And if you don't change your behavior, then it's meaningless, right? So I think I wouldn't tell people not to have a land acknowledgement statement, but the follow-up is what's important. It's not the follow-up. I would say the reparative work is what's important. And there's a lot to repair.
Mm-hmm.
People are not going to move out of their homes and give back all this land to Dakota people. Okay, that's not going to happen. But what they can do is they can think about their relationship where they live to the land in which they live on, in the community in which they live, how they carry themselves, what they purchase, what they consume, what they throw away and so forth, all of that. They can think about that and how they do that. But they can also look at supporting Native projects like Makoce Ikikcupi that is working to restore the land and provide access to Dakota people to their homelands, which is going to ultimately contribute to the health of the land itself and to all of the people who live here.
I like this answer because so much of what a lot of folks think about when they think about a land acknowledgement statement is to think about the history.
Mm-hmm.
But if we just look at the words land acknowledgement, it is about the land,
mm-hmm.
the land today. And that's really important.
Yeah.
So thinking about this land, what advice would you like to give to those who help manage and steward the Hahawakpadan watershed in the surrounding area today? Are there any particular changes or incentives that you would like to see?
Oh, yes. First of all, the wetlands. We're with climate chaos. They're not even calling it climate change anymore, but climate chaos. We have to be vigilant. We can't, to heck with this. Oh, we're going to have this by 2050. No, we have to start today. We have to recognize the preciousness of every single drop of water, and that the wetlands, the creek itself and the wetlands around it need to be restored. Not just taken care of, but restored. They can start with my little park right over here. In the winter, in the fall they cut the plants out of the wetland to put an ice skating rink for people that never use it. They never use it. So they mess with this wetland constantly. So then things can't live there. It's not healthy. So leave it alone. Just, they could start with restoring different places and quit messing with stuff and quit developing it. There was a place, Pennsylvania Woods, up here, that was very nice, very wild. They cut out all the bunch of trees and made little, sculpted sides of the they're just so natural things can't live there. People like it because it looks manicured, but leave shit alone. Leave it alone, because natural things can't live there. Find more places to restore back to the natural habitat. That's the biggest thing that they can do. Quit thinking only in terms of development and the tax dollars that it will bring to Golden Valley. Golden Valley has a very good tax base. They have people here. The majority of people that live here are people that have decent incomes. You have substantial businesses. They don't need a better tax base. Think now in terms of how can we restore the creek, the wetlands, put a buffer with the golf courses where they can't, a substantial buffer where they can't put any chemicals near that creek. And realize that these watersheds store water in times of drought and in times of flooding. They so we need them. We need them to exist. They wonder why, everything's got so dry is because we fill it all in with filler and clay so we can develop it. So, and since we've lived here, there has been a substantial, I would say thousands of trees that have been cut. Thousands. Some of that is because of emerald ash borer, but not all of it. And I think, to me, the water and the trees are commons. They are not, individuals should not just, one person should not just have a say about that, or one business or one homeowner should not have a say about that. It should be a community of people that say, okay, can this take place here? If they say no, then it can't. Is this healthy for the land and for the watershed? No, it cannot take place. I swear to God, I think the people that they hire in the environmental program are somebody's son that needs a job. Because they go out and they're just spraying stuff, to kill, I think, invasives. But they'll spray, they don't know what they're doing. They spray good plants as well. So, and not every dead tree needs to come down. That also provides habitat for beings. And if you begin to, this then could be a more inviting place for Native people to come and teach people about the amazing ecosystem and food systems that were traditionally here.
I like thinking about the waters and the trees as a commons, and just because you own a particular piece of land doesn't mean you get to cut down all the trees on your property if you so wish. We
had a maple tree on the side of the house here, but it belonged to the former owner there. They wanted to put in an egress window. That tree provided shade for that house, this house, several houses. It was massive, beautiful, healthy maple tree. And they cut it down. Couldn't do nothing about it. It was heartbreaking, and I swear to God, I felt that tree shake before they touched it. It just was heartbreaking. It made me cry. And it's just, we're talking about, needing plants like that to take the CO2s out of the atmosphere, to cool the atmosphere. We're allowing people to cut these, and you can plant other stuff, but it takes years and years and years.
Hundreds of years.
Before they're even able to do what that one tree could do.
Right. Again, I think this comes back to responsibility.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And that we're not just... Humans we can be so ego-driven and so selfish in terms of what we think, my rights, my, my, instead of what is good for the whole.
Absolutely. What would you like future generations to know about your experience as a Native person here in Golden Valley? And you've shared so much with us already, so much wisdom about the environment and responsibility and stewardship.
Yeah. I think that's the thing is that I would like people to know that I love this place and that I want them to love it too, and that I'm here to work with them to create and sustain a healthy home for us all here, as the Dakota people once did.
Is there anything else you would like to share?
No. That's more than you probably needed.
Well, thank you so much, Roxanne.
You're welcome. Miigwech for listening.
Naya chopna becha wopira tanka unkeni chiapi. Thank you for listening. This project may serve as a model for other communities that seek to go beyond land acknowledgement. To learn more about this oral history project, please contact Hennepin History Museum. The project was produced following the standards and principles of the Oral History Association. In addition to this podcast, the interview recordings, transcripts, and narrator files included signed legal released agreements can be found at the Hennepin History Museum. Funding and other support was provided by the St. Anthony's Falls Heritage Board, Hennepin History Museum, Valley Community Presbyterian Church, and the University of Wisconsin. This publication was also made possible in part by the people of Minnesota through a grant funded by an appropriation to the Minnesota Historical Society from the Minnesota Arts and Cultural Heritage Fund. Any views, findings, opinions, conclusions, or recommendations expressed in this publication are those of the authors and do not necessarily represent those of the state of Minnesota, the Minnesota Historical Society, or the Minnesota Historic Resources Advisory Committee. Anaya chopna becha wopira unkeni chiapi. Thank you for listening.